I'm going, so it's going to go live again. We're going to start discussing the discrepancies between data model. Okay, so welcome to the Erigon Livestream, and we're going to be discussing the discrepancies in the data model which currently arise between Erigon and Aquila right now because of some improvements that were happening. So first of all, Artem, can you get, I mean, we did talk about it before. Can you just quickly recap what you have changed in a data model and what was the result?
Well, so the largest two differences right now between Erigon and Aquila is that Aquila now has the separation between accounts and storage. That is, accounts are stored in one table and storage in another. Whereas in Erigon, these are both fused into one table. As far as I know, the fusing is the legacy, basically the legacy approach done for reasons that have no relevance now, basically, as far as I know. So they will be separated in Erigon 2 as well, but in Erigon 1 they are fused, whereas in Aquila I have simply separated them right now, while keeping mostly to the rest of Erigon 1's data model. That's one difference. Another difference is that there is a separate stage in Aquila right now called cumulative index, which is run after the downloader. And what it does is that it builds the index of total gas over each block and total number of transactions. This is mostly it's a very small index. It's something like 500 or 600 megabytes for the Ethereum mainnet. And what it does is that it allows to show, basically to estimate the progress of the sync, the real progress of the sync, and estimate how much time is left for our longest stages, that is the sender recovery and the execution, most importantly. So in sender recovery estimates total time left based on how many transactions are left, and the speed, that is how many senders, that is how many transactions are recovered per second. And in case of execution, it's the same, but with gas. So how much gas is executed per second and how much gas is left. And the ratio of these is used to calculate the progress, how much time is left for execution. The index I found the index to be pretty precise over time. Like it can jump here and there in the first seconds or minutes of the stage, but eventually it stabilizes and it shows a rather truthful number. So, but having this index is another departure from Erigon 1's data model. And I'm not sure if there are any more minor differences, but these are like the two major ones.
Okay, so yeah, so regarding this index that you demonstrated earlier as well, it's a really cool feature, I suppose, because it's in terms of the user interface, because it gives a very accurate prediction about how long, because we have the longest stage, right? The execution stage, which could take, depending on your hardware, for the main net, it could take like 3 days or maybe 4 days for some people. And it would be cool to have a prediction about how long it's going to take for this to complete. I agree that, and I think this is not really super invasive change. It's a kind of add-on, right? It's not like something which is changing the other tables. Right, regarding the split of the tables, that is a bit more. It is a kind of more impactful change, and I suppose we will definitely split it up again in Erigon 2. But yeah, so what I wanted to discuss is that, you know, this departure of the data model, which is fine in assuming that we do not want to kind of strive for this data compatibility anymore necessarily, because I think previously it all kind of, I mean, from my point of view, this compatibility thing is just like, I had one idea like last year when the silkworm just started, then this idea changed and then it changed again. So every time when this idea changed, I kind of like said, oh, fine, we don't have to do this compatibility. It's kind of to let these projects go further on their own. So the first thing we did is that initially when Silkworm was started, Andre remembered that we actually wanted, or I wanted to have the Silkworm providing like a kind of plugin for the execution stage, which was faster. But then this requirement has been dropped because it was a bit tricky to, I suppose it was a bit tricky to maintain. And
Well,
then
we actually did it, so
yes,
we can resurrect it if we want.
but I don't think it makes too much sense at the moment. And I think at some point I thought that we basically have to sort of forget about it a bit because it's not the priority. The priority is actually to build the Silkworm out as a standalone implementation, and not just simply the collection of, let's say, components for Erigon to be plugged in. And also, I think one of the reasons why it was a bit hard is the passing around the database handlers, right? The transactions and database handles was tricky.
Well, I mean, hard. It was implemented, it worked, so it's kind of, at least on Linux. I'm not sure about Mac OS. There are some issues on Mac OS and Windows. I mean, it was doable. We did it, and so
yeah,
no like big major hurdles.
right. But yeah, but then we sort of changed the direction to, okay, let's try to just make Silkworm its own product, but still maybe keep the database compatibility, which was okay for the time being. I think it's still a good requirement now because it allows you to test the further stages without having, without basically, you can take the Erigon database and then you just unroll everything else. But now that we see in both Silkworm and Akula, as long as you have the information about the headers and the blocks bodies, you could pretty much do everything else, right? You don't need anything else from Erigon. You can build you can do execution, you can do intermediate hashes, you can build indices. And I think the situation is very close like to that in Akula. So we can say that in the name of, like, let's say, letting these products to develop on their own, we don't want to hang on to this database compatibility idea anymore. And only as far as it's practical, as far as it helps Silkworm and Akula to get tested, right? Do you agree?
I do. I think it's better. I think we already have our own gRPC set of interfaces which we do hang on to, or at least we try to hang on to. But I don't think it was really like realistic to expect that we will, because like the database is the most intimate part of the application, basically defines everything that is inside. So. And and it's not just about Silkworm and Akula, it's also about the Erigon's, like your or Alex Sharov's freedom to innovate. Because if we were to hang on to the binary compatibility, then it would be, I don't know, me, Andrew, like coming to you every time you like change something and asking for details and why the hell did you break the database for us, so on and so forth. So I mean, we have the API. That is like the difference between API and ABI. So we don't necessarily need the ABI compatibility. We just have our own gRPC set of interfaces, which we try to adhere to. Of course, there's a major downside in that RPC daemons can no longer be reused because RPC daemon it's also intimately connected to the database.
That is a very good point, because this is what we've been discussing with Alex, and we actually want to shift out from this. So this is another interesting topic, is that the way that RPC daemon has been created, I mean, back in 2019, was essentially like using remote database access to the Erigon database. And now that we are, now because we're working on Erigon 2 and we are facing this requirement that, for example, now that we're going to start taking the historical blocks and headers and putting them into these files, which are already outside of the database. And of course, with the current KV interface, you simply can't access them. So we are gradually starting to change the interface between RPC daemon and the Erigon to be more higher level, to instead of specifying which table you want to go to and create like a remote cursor and read from it, we simply say, okay, we want the block, or we want the header, or we want this and that. And so this is actually going to start happening inevitably as we are building out the Erigon 2, because in the end goal of Erigon 2 is that the database, like the MDBX part of it, will become pretty small and will contain like a recent and hot data, and most of the information will be offloaded into those files. So yeah, it will be inevitable that in order to access these things remotely, you have to put the kind of more high-level interface on top of them, which will be able to go to both the database and the files, and because they use a very different mechanics of how to fetch the data. So obviously, yes, that interface has to be much more high level. And I'm kind of happy that this is happening, because it's one of these things which kind of falls out naturally. And then whenever that happens, I'm quite happy with that's happening. So good. But another interesting question, which we don't have to answer right now, is when we create the state files, which or like the block history files, obviously we might start from the requirement that, you know, if and when Silkworm and Akula are going to start developing for Erigon 2, whether we want them to use exactly the same files so they can participate in the same swarm, or whether they will eventually again start having their own file formats and do different swarms. I am not currently, like, from the experience of what we had before, I think I'm open for any scenario. I think in the beginning it would be useful to have this basically a swarm, but then eventually, as the popularity of the different implementations changes, then Akula can have, or Silkworm, they can have their own swarms if they find the file format which is more superior.
I think that, like, you know, there is the general comment is that in every topic with every like mastery, there are four stages of mastery, where you first come to learn, to copy, and then you start to innovate on top of it, and then you create something entirely new.
Yes.
So I think the same will basically happen with Akula and Silkworm, in that basically we will first, okay, at least speaking for Akula, we will first re-implement, for example, the same file format that Erigon has, and use that in the beginning. Maybe if we find something better, then we will also innovate on top of it. But again, this is the natural process in terms of the swarm. As long as there is more than one peer, or more than like two peers, we can have millions of swarms. It's fine.
Maybe not exactly millions, but because still the blockchain still don't scale to these numbers yet. Okay, understand. Yeah, so that's good.
I think, from my point of view, we don't necessarily have to have the same format, but to my mind, it's actually a good thing. Why? Because if it's like architecturally, I guess Erigon and Silkworm and Akula are pretty similar. Like generally speaking. And so it's like they would benefit from, like, why would they need different like database formats? So
well, I think
my thinking is of course we don't have to use the same format, but if we try to do that, then probably we'll be forced or like notched to specify the format better, think it better, and like if say Artyom finds how to improve the format, that can be fed back to Erigon and so on. So if you have some, like, I don't know, some piece of software and you have not only a single user of it, but a few users, that it helps to improve the API and the design and so on and clarify things. But then again, it's not that we have to.
yes.
We don't, but I think it will bring some benefits if
Okay.
we try.
But you first have to pioneer the implementation. You first have to actually implement this.
Sure.
And after you have implemented this and roll that out, you can specify it. So basically, like the development of the 3 implementations, it reminds me of like the DAG as opposed to blockchain, like a DAG, where you have basically all 3 coming in the same direction, but not as the same chain or like as the same line, but intertwining in between.
Right.
So basically, they may have they diverge, but they eventually converge on something.
I think you're on mute.
Who, me? No, I think you finished.
No, yeah, I'm finished.
Okay, no, this is right. That's nice. That's a very good discussion. So yeah, that's we are looking forward to what we will discover, and yeah, I think we probably had enough discussion on this topic, unless anybody wants to contribute a bit more. And if not, then thanks everybody for coming to this hopefully not too long live stream today. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very